help people and how I train people. My website is very easy. It's just my name, R.L. Bray, B-R-A-Y, at rlbray.com. And if you go there, you'll find access to a lot of good information, and you can find my email and feel free to ask me questions. This is, this is where I'm at in my life. I'm 75 years old, and at this point in my life, I'm part of my bigger mission is to bring this information and these healing techniques to the world. I still do clinical practice, 12, 15 hours a week. But more these days, I'm wanting people to know the information about this stuff and to be able to learn it for themselves and to help them, their loved ones, in how to do this. A lot of what I'm presenting today and what's available through energy psychology, thought field therapy, is you're not going to hurt anybody. There's no counterindications for using it, for trying it. Either it's going to work for you or it's not. And so you try it a couple of times. If it's not working, you know what? It just means you need something a little different from the toolbox. But in the energy psychology, thought field therapy toolbox, there's a lot of things. So I'm going to invite people to, if they want to tap along, if we get into doing some tapping, to go ahead and do it, because you're not going to hurt yourself. And I think you might help yourself a great deal. So what else can I tell you? I'm in a 50-year relationship with a woman who brings me so much joy and love. And I'm a social worker. I'm a psychologist. I have a PhD in psychology for people who are interested in that kind of academic stuff. I've written, a lot. I got a book, I got a lot of articles, I got a lot of stuff done. I just did a video training on how to do TFT that's available. What else can I tell you about me?
Well, one thing you can actually, I guess my second question, since I asked you to introduce yourself, is trauma, stress. In general, what are we missing about the connection between the two?
Well, stress is a condition in your body that occurs when there is something external or internal that is causing a sense of effort is needed here. And whether that's just to protect yourself or whether that's to lift the weight, you just have to understand stress is a normal condition for all human beings, physically and psychically, because it's like if you want to grow a muscle, what do you got to do? You got to stress the muscle. If you don't stress the muscle, there'll be no growth. Nothing, and there's nothing wrong with it. The body has natural ways to respond to that. Now, the problem becomes, let's say, stay with the muscle for a second. Let's say that you're stressing the muscle to build the muscle strength, and suddenly you've decided to go a little further. So if I'm in the gym, I'm doing a 20 pound and I'm fine. And then I notice that my wife is over there and I'm thinking, well, watch this. And now I'm doing a 30 pound, right? And then I'm looking around and there's some other people there and I want to impress them. So I pick up that 40 pound and then I do a couple of reps. And then I hear this crunch, this tear, this thing that happens. You see, normally, if you're just got regular stress, if you rest and restore yourself, it will heal and you'll be fine. But in a sense of trauma, you've torn the tissue. In the medical world, trauma refers to torn or ripped tissue. And so if you pull a tendon, it's one thing. If you tear a tendon, it's another thing. And it won't get better just by resting it. You're going to have to put in a sling. You might have to have surgery. There may be other things. Well, in the psychic world, it's the same thing. We go through our days every day dealing with different stressors that are coming towards us. And that's fine. We take them on, and our bodies and our mind and our spirit know how to deal with that. And we recover and rest, and then we're ready and stronger to go out and do it more. But sometimes in the world, things happen that rip our psyche, that rip our sense of self. and those are traumatic stress events. So, does this answer your question? Are you getting the way, kind of the way we're looking at it
It
here?
does. And I like the example you gave with the gym because I'm a gym guy,
Ah,
right?
okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
after work today, I went and I ran on the treadmill and I was like, Robert, whew, my body's under some stress.
Yes. And that's
Right?
a good thing.
It was a good thing. But then
Yeah.
I sat back and I was like, okay, I started to have like these thoughts. Okay, I need to lose a little bit of weight here. I need to build up my muscle here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that happen when it comes to traumatic experience? When we get the stress, we let the negative thoughts come in and then we can traumatize ourselves. Is that a possibility?
Yes. So what happens is that in the initial kind of trauma, what happens is we are overwhelmed. There's an overload to our system. And that would normally work, that we could manage that, is not working. And that's understandable because we have not developed the stress for that. I mean, if suddenly if you're seeing damaged bodies, and it's going to affect you because you're going to be aware of the pain and of the terrible things that have happened. And unless you're trained to deal with that, you're going to be overwhelmed by that. And that overwhelmed feeling is going to stay with you because then suddenly you have to find ways to cope with that, either push it away or to be able to ignore it or be able to just shut down. So, what we do is we have to pay attention. So if you look at it physiologically, we have the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, where the heart's beating and you're running fast. And that's really a good thing. Um, as long as you get to a point where you get to restore yourself. And that restoration comes from the parasympathetic nervous system, which then calms the body, calms the system, and allows for rest and restoration. So it's the same thing that you suddenly find yourself overwhelmed emotionally, physically, psychically, spiritually by the events that are happening around you. And so it tears you, and you need to know how you're going. It doesn't always. Sometimes it's just traumatic stress without all of the violence that goes with it. It's just you're stressed. Sometimes it's too much, and you end up having dreams. You end up being hyper vigilant. You end up not being able to trust, not being able to trust yourself or others. You find yourself avoiding certain situations or cues and triggers. When that happens, you got to address it. You can't just pretend it's going to go away on its own. And so that's where the work of people who assist in healing trauma come in. And that's where the work that I do comes in. Um, people sometimes say, well, Bob, what do you do for a living? And I'll say, well, the best way to explain it is I'm the guy you never want to meet. Because if you're coming to me, it means that the worst thing in the world, the worst thing in the world that you can imagine has happened to you or people you love. And you need some help managing that. I'm kind of like you're moving along the road of life and suddenly an event happens and you find yourself in the ditch. You're stuck. You can't move. You can't go forward. Well, I'm just a tow truck comes along, pulls you out of the ditch, puts you on the road, and sends you back on your cars. Um, and there's lots of ways that that's done. And we have to pay attention to these things.
So let me ask you then, what are some of the obstacles that people face when it comes to identifying some of the traumatic events in their life?
Well, sometimes it's like it's too difficult and too scary to even face it, to even acknowledge it. And so, what you do is you try to just avoid any of those triggers. You try to avoid any of those things that take you back to that space. And there's lots of ways you do that. You do that by developing, personality styles that help you not be connected to people. You develop addictive kinds of patterns that allow you to be lost in the addiction so you don't have to notice or think about anything else. And so that's why oftentimes you see, I've done a lot of work with veterans over the years, military veterans who have seen combat, who have seen nastiness just in training. And, what you have to do is find a way to be able to process it, to integrate it, and to be able to go on with your life without saying, oh, I just need to avoid this. Um, and that's how I've worked with Vietnam veterans, and that's 50 years ago, folks, that have had lots of treatment and lots of care, and yet they're still addicted to alcohol or drugs, or they're addicted to something that helps them avoid acknowledging what they experienced. And, a lot of times the piece that's missing is the energetic. It's not the talking part. It's the part that makes it experience in the moment that's real, that allows the healing, that then allows you to be able to actually engage the upper part of your brain and talk about it.
You
So,
mentioned it affects the personality and things like that. I used to know a lady where she had stressful situations, especially in her romantic relationships.
yeah, yeah,
And what happened is that she began to avoid it because it was, I guess, too much for her to address it, or
yeah,
maybe even
yeah,
her partner wasn't capable. So she
yeah,
developed an avoidant behavior
yeah,
personality, right?
yeah,
So now, when she ended up leaving those relationships and she ended off in new relationships, the first sign of any potential conflict, she's gone. I block you, I remove you, things like that. Are those some in general some of the signs that people develop that it shows up in their relationships because now they're just avoiding any type of disagreement?
yeah, yeah. I think becoming conflict avoidant is a coping mechanism that works really well. If you were in a conflictual situation where you were harmed or you weren't able to process it in a positive way, you're going to just want to avoid the conflict, as opposed to, yeah, there'll be disagreements, but we can talk through it, we can figure it out, but we have to address that. And so let me just a distinction here now. This woman, it may have been one traumatic event, with someone, and it turned violent and it was horrible, and then that shift happened. But mostly when we're talking about that kind of personality thing, I would hazard a guess that she had a lot of small t trauma. And by that I mean big T trauma is the saber-tooth tiger is coming at you. The guy with the gun is in your face. Yeah, that's pretty clear. But the small T trauma is what we experience as children in terms of our own development. One of the one of the forms of violence that's most difficult for me to watch is a parent, and they don't intend it. But when you're working with a family and a kid says something and the parent's response is, "No, you don't think that." Well, he just said it. He thinks it, and he's doing it. Or he'll say, "No, in this family we don't feel that way." Well, that child is feeling it. And so now the child has to figure out, what do I do with this feeling that I'm not supposed to have, and that's going to distance me from my caretaker. And it's like, okay, so I don't have that feeling. But we're teaching the child how to disassociate from a feeling. We're teaching that child how to silence his voice. And that is small t trauma. Because in that process, if they don't learn that somebody loves them, they don't learn how to love themselves. And, what you want a parent to say is, it's an interesting feeling you're having, son. And let's talk about it, because it's okay you feel that. And I love you. And we're going to figure it out. It's the same thing with behavior. I mean, you don't have to say to your kids, oh, any behavior is fine. But if they're acting in a way that's expressive of themselves, you have to say, oh, we're going to do this in a safer way. And I love you, and I'm not going to allow you to hurt yourself or anybody else. But the message of you're a loved being is the one that we have to carry with us, that when we get to be that adult and we see that horrible, bloody thing happen, that we remember we are a loved and a complete person with support from other people, regardless of how we're feeling. And then we can start to express it. We can start to work with it. We can change it and we can move through it. Um, so your friend may have had some small T trauma that was just um, exaggerated by a traumatic event with a partner. Um, and what I would say to her is, honey, can you love yourself? Because if you can't love yourself, you're not going to believe this guy when he said, "Oh, I love you." And you're thinking, that can't be true. I'm not lovable. Oh, he's lying to me, because it's not a possibility in your own self. So that's one of the things. It's not exactly trauma work, but I spend a lot of time trying to get people to come to understanding um, that they need to love themselves, to know they're loved, and to give love.
Is it hard for people to love themselves if they don't know how they want to be loved?
Well, yeah, because if you don't get that, I was lucky enough to have a mother and a father who loved one another and thought it was their duty and their privilege to love their children. And so while I was not a perfect kid, and while I have my own set of issues that I've dealt with, there is never a doubt in my mind that mom loved me, dad loved me. And that must mean there's something in me that's of value. There's something in me that even if I can't be perfect, I'm still okay. And because I know that, when my wife says to me, "I love you," I take it in. It's like, yeah, yeah, I'm lovable. Isn't that cool? You know?
I remember
So,
the first time you mentioned energy work earlier. I remember the first time that I'd had an energy reading done, energy work done on me.
uh-huh.
It was a couple months. My relationship at that time was failing,
Hmm.
and I knew that it was going to come to an end. Even though we both tried to work on it, it just couldn't be salvaged at that point. But it didn't end yet.
Hmm.
I got the energy work done, and I remember the person telling me we had the conversation, and I was planning to move to a different area to be with this woman at the time.
Hmm.
And she was like, Terrain, the places you give me, it shows up this way. It's not a good fit for you and your energy. So she's telling me all these things, not
Yeah.
knowing that my relationship is ending. And I'm like, wow. So I started to ask questions because now I'm curious. And
Right.
it's just such an amazing experience because the first time is always the best time, right? The novelty of it and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after she did it, the conversation, a couple months later, she was presenting the findings. And now my
Hmm.
relationship had ended. So when she's
Hmm.
reading this to me, I told her, "Oh, by the way, my relationship ended." And she's like, "I knew it." She's like, "That's why you should. That's why it's coming up that it was such a bad idea energetically for you to move because the type of person that you are and what you're looking for, it wouldn't have aligned in these different areas." When it comes to the energy work, I know that there's some people out there that doubt it. There's some hesitation and there's maybe some misunderstandings. So, what do you want to clarify from the energetic perspective when it comes to myths or misunderstandings of it?
Okay, well, the first thing is to say that person was working in a specific form of energy work. She was working in mediumship. She was working in a shamanistic and a spiritual kind of connecting with others with information that was hers. We used to call that intuition, but there's more. It's a much more specific kind of way of doing it, and that energy work requires that whoever's doing it has a well-developed talent and skill for doing that kind of stuff. But when we talk about energy work, there's a whole lot more, and it's accessible to all of us. So the energy we talk about is the energy in our body, in the meridian systems that run throughout our body, in the chakra systems that run throughout our body, in the sounds that reverberate through us in our body. These are all energy systems. Even language and talking can be considered, it's a little trickier, but it can be considered energetic. But the way that I found is the most powerful is Dr. Callahan's the guy who first stumbled onto this stuff. And he was just a man of amazing curiosity. He was a brilliant man. But what he found is that there was a relationship between what were the thoughts or the focus or the attention of our consciousness and what was our body's reaction to that. Was it strong? Was it weak? Was it something that we should pay attention to? Was it something we couldn't? So he started by learning how to do muscle testing, energy testing, okay, by pushing on people's arms. And then he found that there was a relationship between what made you strong and what made you weak in regards to your psychological states. And then he was able to find when there were states or conditions or triggers that made you weak, that you could change that, you could heal that weakness at the core, at the fundamental thought field level, the processing place, by adding energy to it, by stimulating meridian treatment points in specific orders. So, we don't use needles, we just tap on this is a bladder point, or under the eye, a stomach point, and you would stimulate those points and add energy to the meridian system, which then would make that correction within the control mechanism, the thought field that was, sort of driving all of the emotion, all of the feelings that were going on. And then he went on to develop it into a full style. And the nice thing about thought field therapy and using energy testing is there's no guesswork. There's a test for everything we do to see if you need it. There's a test to see if it worked. There's a test to see what's next. And by that, I mean energy testing. And for me, it's as simple as I moved from pushing on arms to just moving my finger. And I'm using a muscle in my arm to help me be able to do that. And the beauty of this energy work is it's it's not specific to a place. It's not specific to a time. When you work with energy, it's non-local. So in a few minutes, if you want, I'll do a little with you, and I'll ask you if I may be a surrogate tester for you. So I will be using my own muscles, but I'll be testing your body's response to whatever we're working on. And so that's the beauty of this. Now, people may think this is, hokey pokey or whatever, but what I want you to know, when I started this, in 96, there were only 2 articles written in the professional journals about thought field therapy. Now, energy psychology, there's over 400 articles that have been written and published in journal peer-reviewed sources. And if you want that, you simply go to energypsych.org and go to that website. That's the association's place. And there's a place where all those 400 articles are listed. There's a bibliography. It's done in different ways. So if you want research, if you're into that kind of stuff, we have it today. And it is proven to be the best treatment for trauma and the most studied treatment for trauma of anything. And so people who say, oh, that sounds interesting, but it's, there's no evidence, do your homework. There's lots of evidence. We have lots of studies that show that it's very powerful and it works.
I think that's a beautiful answer, because there's so many different ways for us to either identify and understand our trauma or past experiences, or even just to say that this is what I'm handling, this is what I'm struggling with, and this is why I'm ignoring it. Let's take work, for example, right? Many people, when they're going through a difficult situation at home, the first place they go to is work. Let me go work 12, 14, 16 hours.
Oh, yeah, to avoid the
Right?
rest. Mm-hmm.
To avoid the rest, because our home is supposed to be the safe space. When the job becomes our safe space, there's like an imbalance.
Right.
Do you see that imbalance with people where the support that they're getting, that they're supposed to be getting from their home, their family, for example,
Right.
they're not getting it, so they got to go to external things?
Well, yeah, that's why a lot of couples end up dealing with affairs because you're not getting what you need at home. Not only in a sexual sense, that's really the least of what happens in affairs. It's much more the emotional affair that you see commonly and that people are looking for it in a different place. And so, there's not, if you can just find a way to voice your need and to engage with your partner around what those things are, you don't need to go someplace else. But if you're not getting it at home, you're going to go to work, you're going to go to the bar, and you don't need to do that. It's just a matter of being able to be honest about what you need. And that isn't always easy because we have expectations for ourselves that don't always, um, and they don't always meet the expectations of our partners. And so you do move away from it. And that's why it's so important when you do suffer a traumatic event that you treat it because you want to bring down the stress. See, what happens is when you get activated, the sympathetic system gets activated, overactivated, then what happens is your brain don't work. So I usually, I divide the brain into two parts. There's the top of the brain and there's the bottom of the brain, which includes the brain stem and the rest of the body. And what happens is that when you have a release of adrenaline, when you have a fear that overtakes you and your body starts to have that activation, the top of your brain don't work. And the top of your brain is what's the important thing because that's what allows us to sort of take in new data, find a way to analyze that data, find a way to incorporate that into creating a problem solving plan, to talk about what the choice is around those plans and the action that we will then take. But all of that happens in the top of the brain, but none of it happens when you're overactivated and you just can't breathe, you just can't get a good focus, or when you're overstimulated and you just go into shutdown mode, the brain don't work. So that's part of what you have to recognize is you start by helping the person be able to um, calm the system, to downregulate. And then you can start to get into, well, what's going on and how you're thinking about these things. I'm sorry, what was the question you asked me?
No, you answered it beautifully, and
Oh,
that set
okay.
me up. You got me thinking about this man in my neighborhood because you talk about the brain, you talk about
Right,
regulation, right? And
right.
I think emotional regulation is so important, but so many
Yeah,
people struggle with it.
yes,
Um, Top of the brain regulation.
right,
People who catastrophize events.
right,
They turn on the
right,
news and it's like, oh my God, I saw someone, someone was robbed in a
right,
different
yeah,
part of town. So
right.
now I have to lock my doors, put the blinds on, and everything else. How does that impact people's life, the information they're taking in?
Well, at the top of your brain, what's happening is you're responding to what you've learned. The brain is a prediction instrument. And if your experience is that when there's violence around, it's going to happen to you, then whenever you see it in whatever form, then you predict that it's going to happen. And that puts you into a stressed place. And it's very difficult to get out of that because now you're stressing yourself and probably triggering yourself back to memories of events that support that position. And so the key is to be able to allow the brain to be in a calm enough place to learn something new. And that's done through a process. There's several ways, but memory reconsolidation is a way that you undo bad learning. You just don't add new learning on top of it. You undo the original bad learning and you sort of rewire your brain in a way that now you're predicting outcomes in a different way, which doesn't trigger you. So there's a circular loop to that. Let me give you a sense of this. Okay. If you're willing, what I'd like you to do is think about an event, and your listeners can do this with us if they want, but think of an event in the past that when you think of it, you still feel some upset in your body. You still feel some, oh, you got one. It's not hard to get there. We all have them, right? So, what I would ask you to do, so the first thing is notice where you're experiencing it in your body. And I want you to rate the level of distress, the level of upset. Um, 0 would be nothing, and 10 would be the worst you can imagine. Now, it's not happening now, so probably when it happened, it was higher. But right now, as you pull it up, and are you visual?
Yes, yes, I am. I'm a visual person.
Okay, so as you pull up, if you're visual, as you pull up the image that sort of holds that memory, got it? Notice the distress in your body and rate it 0 to 10.
I have it. I have the rating.
Okay. Would you share it with me so I know if I'm doing this?
Absolutely. So no, that's fine. I would say, do you want to know what I'm visualizing or just the rating?
No, no,
Yeah.
you can share as much as you want, but I just like to know where I'm
Yeah.
starting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm remembering growing up without my mother and my father, and right now I'm feeling a 5, bringing that memory back up.
Okay. And is there a specific picture that pulls that up for you?
Yes, there
Okay.
is. Even though, yeah, there is.
So
Yes.
hold the picture. And what I'd like you to do is tap the side of your hand. Just slide down from your pinky finger. And then I want you to tap under your nose. Now, what I'm doing is a standard tapping pattern. I'm not doing any energy testing with you. Beginning of eyebrow, under eye, under arm, about 4 inches down from your ribs. With women, we say it's your bra, a line there. And then under the collarbone. So you're going to come under the collarbone, that little hollow spot just before your sternum, maybe a little over, a little further. Yeah. And now your index finger under the collarbone, tiny finger under the collarbone. Okay, so that's the first part. Then, and the way that I do tapping, thought field therapy, is you're going to tap between these two small knuckles, about a 1/2 inch towards your wrist, and keep tapping while we do 9 things very quickly. Close your eyes for a moment. Open your eyes. Now, just with your eyes, look down into the left. And just with your eyes, look down into the right. Now, whirl your eyes in a big circle. Keep tapping all the way around. Now, back the other way, all the way up to the ceiling, all the way to the floor. Now, hum a couple of bars of any tune. And then count out loud 1, 2, 3, 4. And then hum again. And then we're going to repeat the tapping we just did. Side of hand, under nose, beginning of the eyebrow, either one, under the eye on the orbital bone, under the arm, under the collarbone, index finger, under the collarbone, tiny finger, under the collarbone. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to pull up the same picture. And what do you notice in your body now?
I noticed that when I was doing that tapping, and I know that I told you I have previous experience, is
Yeah,
that it helps to decrease the way I was feeling because I'm focused on the tapping and what I'm doing instead of that specific image, for example.
yeah. Now that tells me that it works. What's the number now?
I'd say it's probably a 2 or
Right,
1.
right. So you went from a 5 to a 1. Now, the interesting thing is I know it worked because you were giving me an explanation of how it worked. You were saying I was distracting you. And so because you were being distracted, it was coming down. And that's not an uncommon event. And I know it worked for you because you had to figure out a way to explain it. And so you're telling me that. But what I'll tell you is it was not a distraction technique. If it was a distraction technique, I wouldn't be asking you to think it up, to pull it up again, to pay attention to it. If I were doing a distraction technique, I would be wanting you to move away from it. But what I want you to do is to be able to own your memories and have them be memories and not activate them as though it's a flashback, as though it's happening now. Because the reality is whatever the picture was that you're holding on to is in the past. And the problem becomes is when your body reacts to it as though it's happening now. But it is a memory. And it's like any other picture that you pick up off the mantle and you look at it and you think, oh, I have feelings about that. I remember this, or I felt that way then. I feel this way about it. And then when you're done with it, you put it back on the mantle. And the problem is in traumatic stress and in PTSD, you can't put it down. Once you're activated, you're caught in that moment and in that time. And what we do with the tapping is we heal the hurt that was happening then to allow you to move more fully into the here and now. That stuff's not happening here and now. You're a man who has gone through a lot in your life, has learned a lot, who has lots more than you had then. And so you can never feel again like you felt then, because now you can remember the feelings, but it's not going to be your here and now. And in this here and now, that picture has a different meaning and a different relationship to you. Does that make sense?
It does, especially because we're talking about maybe unhealthy ways to get through something. Now we're talking about healthier ways. When it comes to
Yeah.
seeking out help, Robert, what
Yes.
role do you think then guilt and shame plays in us not accepting or even seeking out help or community?
Well, it's a little difficult to be able to fully assess that without knowing the person because, sometimes you'll offer help to somebody, I'll offer help to somebody, and they'll say, no, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And it's because they know that there is no real help for them, that they're so damaged, that they're so undeserving, that they're so wrong, that they deserve to feel what they feel, and there's no way to stop it. So a lot of times, I don't. I think guilt and shame is a mechanism to help you avoid getting hurt again. And so I would simply say that to them. That's look, I'm not going to. See, I've been doing this for so long. I can say to whoever I'm working with, I promise you, I will not leave you in that space. And I know that if they can trust me enough to go into it long enough to experience it, and for us to use some energy psychology, which you saw was just the simplest thing, to heal that they're going to come back and they're going to come back into this moment and be able to move forward. So, now part of that is just this is what I've been doing for the last 50 years of my life. But anybody can do tapping just like we did. That was a standard pattern. It's called the crisis tapping pattern. You can get it on my website. You can see me doing that tapping just like I did with you. And that's the simplest technique or the most standard thing we start with. Now, if that hadn't worked with you, I would have used any number of other techniques, different tapping patterns, or I would have just gone directly to energy testing. And when we energy test, I get direct direction and guidance from your own internal healers, your own body's way of responding, your spirit's own way of responding. And so the tapping pattern may be different for you than it is other people, but I'm connecting energetically to you and to those parts of yourself that already know what you need to do to be better.
You mentioned value. Could some people believe, think, feel that they deserve the pain that they're going through?
Oh, yeah, a lot of people do. Why wouldn't you? Because you've been told that your whole life. You know, I'm gonna, if you weren't such, if you pay attention and you think about this, then I wouldn't have to hit you. Sorry, I didn't mean to trigger anybody. Um, but
No, but
it's
childhood, that's some people's childhood, right? It's the
right,
abuse.
right.
Don't cry
And
or
you,
give you something to cry for.
right, right. And so you begin to believe that you deserve it because you've earned it somehow, or you've not performed in a way that's there. When your grandparents, your grandma, she loved you, and above all else, you experienced it as love. And so you can carry that forward. Now, there probably a lot of other people in your life did not love you in that way. I mean, Jesus, a black man in America, I can't imagine what it's like. But the thing is that we want people to know that you don't deserve to be in pain and you don't deserve to suffer. And you didn't, nobody deserves to get hit. I mean, I believe that we all are guaranteed certain rights, and those rights are to feel our feelings and to give expression to them, to think our thoughts and to give expression to them, to choose our actions as long as we're not harming another, and to follow through on those actions. And that's why I was saying earlier, it's upsetting to me when I see a parent telling a kid how they feel. The kid feels what they feel. Um, and so if you're grown up and you're convinced that your feelings don't count or your thoughts don't matter, um, then yes, you buy into you deserve this.
Let's look at the childhood experience then. If someone grew up that way where I'll give you, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry for, or
Yeah,
their feelings are being minimized or even outright dismissed,
yeah, yeah,
as that child grows up then,
yeah.
where does the responsibility lie? With the child, with the parent, or someone else?
Well, I think that the bottom line is that when that child becomes conscious, when that child becomes able to make decisions on their own, it's their decision. If somebody's 35 years old and they come to see me and they say, I'm like this because my parents did this to me, I'll say, yeah, probably. And right now, your parents aren't in this room, and you have to figure out how you're going to be. The responsibility for your action is not your parents anymore, it's you. You're here, you're now, and there's no big person standing over you demanding you do something. And so the problem is if you get into blaming parents, then you have to blame their parents, and then you have to blame their parents, and it just goes on forever. But what we really want is for you to recognize they're not in the room with you now, and they're not controlling your psyche anymore. Your spirits are your spirits, not theirs. And it's okay for you to assume responsibility for what you do. And do you need some help with it? Sure. Okay, we got help around us. We got guidance around us. But it's a little trickier when you're talking about a 17-year-old. Some of the shooting stuff. It's very difficult for me to think that 17-year-old was actually fully in control of themselves. And do I think the parents missed an opportunity to protect their kid and somebody else, a 6-year-old that takes a gun to school? Do I think the parents missed an opportunity to protect themselves and their children? Yes. And it falls with the parent. But that kid's just doing what a kid does.
Let me ask you, Robert, one final question before I let you go today. I want to give you three wishes. What are three things you wish people knew about the benefits of energy work and why?
I wish they knew that they don't have to continue to live their life in pain, and that their life doesn't have to be controlled by that pain, that they are, um, capable of assuming responsibility for themselves, for the people they love, and not just reacting to the pain or reacting to the training of violent parents or communities. I wish people knew that, and they could actually believe that they can find a way to end the suffering without having to go out